Here in the new GAB, you're standing basically in the heart of our civic life in the Commonwealth and this ongoing experiment in representative self-government. And I think it's a very participatory activity. And we just didn't have a building that enabled the public, let alone their representatives, to do the work that they need to be doing.
So we wanted to have a building that would facilitate good governance and to somehow get people together to work collaboratively, to work out really difficult issues, and to do so in a way which is independent of party lines and visible to members of the public.
We just really think it's important for the skyline, for the cityscape, or in the fabric of our Commonwealth, a building that talks not just to the future, but also makes sense and communes with the past.
Our building is located outside of the fencing around Capitol Square Park, and that for us was very significant, that it be a sort of noble backdrop, but also a fairly simple building in terms of not overshadowing the Capitol, given that it's much taller.
So our main motivation here was to do something that would really contribute to that overall urban composition, which is not an urban composition of a year or a decade or even a century. It grew over a period of a couple of centuries. The existing building on the site was actually 3 existing buildings. It was a really significant building built for the Life Insurance Company of Virginia in 1911 by Clinton and Russell, who were a noted and very successful New York firm. And then they did an addition to that building that faced Broad Street in the 1920s, and then there was a further building that was built in the 1970s. It was these buildings that the floors didn't align and they had to be connected, and they were never thought of as being designed for serving the legislature, but they had to be brought into that function. As a result, it freed up an entire urban block, and a very interesting block, because on the one side it faces on historic Capitol Square, and on the other side it faces on historic Broad Street, which is the main commercial street historically running through the center of Richmond. So it is a building without a back. It has these 2 very different fronts, and we wanted to make sure that as we were designing a new building, that it was responding to that condition. We felt that there was a facade of the original 1911 building which was really architecturally significant. I felt that strongly, and it became clear that there were several people in historic preservation groups in Richmond who also felt the same thing. And so we did an analysis of what would be involved in keeping that facade or not keeping the facade. So we designed a building that integrated the historic facade into it. It maintained a uniform cornice line, which historically runs all the way around Capitol Square. And it also became very popular in the city of Richmond that the Department of General Services had saved this significant facade. So we're proud to have been able to make them look so good.
When we were thinking about the materials, we did consider the context. So Thomas Jefferson's Capitol is stone and stucco, and it's a very bright white, so clearly there's a focus within the park. Our building, meant as a backdrop, actually uses some of the same materials, or at least looks like it uses some of the same materials as the neighboring buildings that are made out of limestone and granite. So there's a certain preference for stone. So our intention was to try and connect through with those materials and to use a limestone simulacrum, a precast envelope, but to finish the precast in a very careful way, in a deliberate way, so that it emulated some of the sort of slightly textural feeling of the limestone. And I think, generally speaking, it's fairly successful, so that it looks like limestone blocks that were sort of put together by hand, as would have been done, 100 years ago.
The old GAB, some people kind of found a nostalgia for it. I never understood that. It was asbestos-ridden columns in the middle of committee rooms. It was difficult to move through. It just didn't meet the needs of a modern, thriving 21st century legislature. So it was truly one of the happiest days is when we all got to take the sledgehammer and start doing the demolition of that.
And that was partly because those buildings served them very poorly. Very limited space for the public, very limited space for committee discussions. It's an interesting public perception for people who don't know much about state government that most of the functioning of state government takes place in the 2 chambers. But in fact, the House chamber and the Senate chamber are really only open for fairly limited sessions. And a lot of the preparation of that legislation takes place in committee rooms. where members of the public can come in and committees of the House and committees of the Senate come together to draft and refine and develop the legislation that will ultimately be heard on the chamber floor. So we've designed a very carefully tailored program to what exists and is still of value in the historic State House. It has always concerned me that in public buildings, the first experience when you arrive is security guards and X-ray machines and magnetometers. And I think that sends the wrong message. So in this building, we put all of that off in a separate room, a nicely appointed and sizable room with natural light, so it's a pleasant space, but people come in and they clear security there. They then process into the main double-height lobby, the double-height lobby which anchors the center of the main 4 floors, which are publicly accessible with all of the committee rooms. So that sequence, arriving at the front door, either on Capitol Square or on Broad Street, passing through security, discovering the gravitas and the majesty of the lobby, and then feeling oriented and connected was really central to our design.
I think the building helps people get through. The stairwells are beautiful. The main stairwell in the center of the building, where you get to appreciate the architectural splendor of the old 1912 facade. It's an inviting experience. It's a people business, and you run into a lot of people here, and I think that's a good thing.
The big open staircase, which is behind the historic facade that we preserved, connects all 4 floors that are available to the public, all 4 committee floors, from the tunnel level, when one arrives from the State House, to the top committee room level, and it sends a clear message that members of the public can come and go along with legislators all together and see each other and interact. We didn't want people to be huddled in elevators. We didn't want people to go into stairs that felt like fire stairs. We wanted to have really generous stairs that sent a message about this being a house of the people.
There's a cafeteria there and a coffee bar where people just sort of replenish themselves as they move up into the building and participate in the legislature. There's pre-function space. Pre-function space is really a fancy way of saying it's a waiting room, an area where people can sit and check their emails or read some of the information on the legislature that's going to be debated and be prepared before the actual hearing takes place. Beyond that, there's a sort of cutoff point where there's space which is dedicated solely to offices for the legislature and the members' offices. So there are 40 senators and 100 representatives, and they all have offices in this building. In addition to that, there are legislative aides that assist them, interns that assist the legislative aides, and administrative assistants as well. And so all of those sort of are co-located in each and every upper floor. We had prior relationships with Gauvain Homes Architecture, who are an excellent teammate on this project. They worked on the interior fit out on all the upper floors, the members' offices and leadership floors, and we enjoyed very much working with them.
Just being able to have, as we're sitting here in the late afternoon and wintertime, the sun-filled space. And so having every office have a natural light for not just the members, but for the legislative assistants adds a dimension of fun. You know, yes, it's important work and yes, it's hard work, but you just come in and you feel uplifted. It's a popular place that people want to come to. And for an institution that was going on and serving the people for over 405 years, having people want to come and participate, enjoy, and then maybe even relax and stay for a while and just take in the afternoon sun, a nice cup of coffee, and kind of reflect on some things. I think that's a wonderful testament to the accomplishments of Robert Armstrong Architects, and also just our partnership. I mean, and it really was a partnership. It was a very iterative process, and I mean that in a most positive way. We know what to do in the legislative process. We don't know what to do in terms of great architecture. The fact that you listened, we were always impressed by that. Taking into our concerns, taking into our ideas, you really helped us accomplish something that's not just stunning, but stately, and will stand the test of time on the skyline here in Richmond.
And I think the result of that is a building which is better than something that either we or they could do on their own. And a lot of that learning had to do with really understanding what is the process they go through. How does this building serve the public? How is legislation conceived, drafted, refined, presented, enacted? And how can a building at each step along the way facilitate that process? And we're very pleased to hear that the General Assembly building now is seen as a manifestation of good governance, and it facilitates that.